Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Blue Maxima, and I'm here to talk to you. That's a bad start. About Disaster Report 4: Summer Memories. This game was originally scheduled to come out back in like 2012, but thanks to the fact that Japan had that massive earthquake and tsunami in 2011, and god, that was a while ago, the game never actually came out. And then like developers got changed, the game changed hands, and they decided to just eventually release it in like 2018. And then we got it in 2020. And I've always been curious about this series because games like Raw Danger have always been in like the list of games that are like quote-unquote hidden gems on the PlayStation 2. And I thought to myself, I'll get to that one of these days. Then they announced they were going to release Disaster Report 4, which is basically this game this in the same franchise. And I thought to myself, okay, I'll grab it, I'll give it a shot. And I sent off an email to NIS America saying, hey, do you mind giving me a review code for this? And they were like, silent? And then the day the game came out, the review code just dropped in my inbox. So sure, why not? I played the game for about 3 hours, and it's the biggest pile of tripe I've played in the last 12 months. I'm honestly surprised. I did not expect it to be as just overwhelmingly bad as it is. Now, the first thing I'll talk about is the state of the PC port, because this game didn't originally come out for the PC, it came out for the PS4. And the PC port is really bad because, well, it's horribly unoptimized. Now, my computer is an i7 A700K and an RTX 2080, so it's not a slouch by any means. It can get to about 100, 110 frames per second on this game, way lower if you've got it all on Ultra, something like 90, which is really bad for a game like this that's so simple it looks like it could be a really, really late PlayStation 2 game. But it also runs so hard and fast that it actually made my computer turn off at one point. Really weird. Like, I don't know why it did that. It's done it for one other game as well, which is also really unoptimized, but it also has an excuse because it's Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord, which is still in early access. And it also doesn't have a frame rate limiter of any kind, so I had to go and manually apply a frame rate limiter to keep it at 60 frames a second in order to make sure it didn't just completely destroy my computer again. But yes, the fact that it can't even hit like 90 frames on a computer like this means that it probably isn't very good in the optimization department. Even weirder, it runs on Unreal Engine. So you'd think they'd have an easier time of optimizing it because they'd have lots of like documentation about it, but well, they don't. The second is that there's a lot of weird bugs that happen, I assume, because of the PC port. Like I showed earlier on in this footage, where if you go into the options menu and swap the controls back and forth, the text wrapping screws up. There's a few other things like that as well, but the main thing is a screenshot I'm going to drop in around this point in the commentary, where I managed to somehow turn the sun off by changing the graphical options. Not entirely sure how I managed to pull that one off, but I sure as hell did. With that said though, I really do need to talk about the game more than anything else. And the game itself is, well, I feel like calling it a walking simulator would be a little bit too much, but it gets pretty close. So here's the drill. There's an earthquake going on in this gigantic Japanese city, and you need to basically survive it. How do you survive it? By not getting crushed by falling buildings, rubble, or what have you. And by progressing through the game's preset levels. How do you do this? Via walking around the environments, talking to the people that you find, finding random objects, and then having things in the world happen around you, basically. Now, it's really, really strict in how this walking around and finding people and doing things happens. You have to do them in a very specific order. I don't know if there's anything in particular you can miss, because the amount of times the game has made me wander around looking for one particular thing has been ridiculously high. So for example, you'll see a building and you'll think to yourself, oh, that building's fine, whatever. Then you'll walk into an area and do a goal, and then you'll come back out and that building will fall right the fuck over. Also, by the way, while I do appreciate that you can absolutely get crushed by buildings, and like, seriously, you can get wiped the fuck out by a falling building. I'm pretty sure I demonstrated at some point in this footage, but while I appreciate that you can get wiped out by a falling building and then you can just continue right from where you left off, that actually works, like, alright. There's this system that goes with buildings falling over or aftershocks happening, where you have to press the X button on an Xbox 360 pad. That's what I played this on. And you have to press it while something's falling over. Otherwise, you will eat shit. The game will automatically knock you off your feet and send you flat onto your face, and you'll lose some life. Nobody else does this, by the way. No other, like, NPCs or anything will fall over and eat shit. It's just you. It's kind of funny the first time, but the game sends aftershocks at you constantly, and you don't know which ones are going to knock you off your feet. So basically, you just have to wait for the screen to start shaking, and you have to hit that button. And after the 8th or 9th time this happens, you just start getting sick of it, because you just have to stop and wait for it to happen for a few seconds, which is frustrating. But it's also frustrating when you realize that aftershocks also mean that you might need to get out of the way or something, and this cannon will get you killed, probably. Maybe. You have to keep a pretty close eye out on everything, which is kind of hard to do when you drop to your hands and knees and look around like an idiot, but anyway. But yes, the progression of the game. You're wandering around, you're finding people in a very preset order, things are happening in a very preset order, and you just have to, you know, go with the flow. The problem is the game doesn't tell you where you need to go, and this can get really, really confusing at times, because the game will often expect you to go to one really small place that's really out of the way and do something there, and then when you come back to an area that previously didn't do anything, something will have changed. One of the worst examples I've seen so far of this in the game is later on in this video, where I basically had to spend 15 minutes walking around finding out where the fuck I was supposed to be going. And I actually cut that footage out to save you some time, but trust me, this video was like 2 hours long originally. But the idea is, in this situation, there's this fast food restaurant that you can walk into. And I did, and I talked to the clerk, and the clerk was an idiot, by the way. The clerk says something like, "I heard a loud noise. What do you think happened?" It's a fucking earthquake, you dolt. You did not feel like the 10 aftershocks that happened between the beginning of the game and anyway. I'll get to the writing shortly, but in this fast food restaurant, there's a second floor. I didn't go up to the second floor. I just went around the first floor and thought to myself, okay, there's nothing here, and walked out the door. And turns out, in order to actually progress the plot, you need to go up to the second floor and find the backpack they have sitting there. And then when you come back down, the area will shake, and that is usually a sign that something has changed in the world. So you think to yourself, okay, let's go. And we walk around for a bit. And generally the game's linear, which is the one hint that I'll give you that's helped me out so far. You generally won't have to backtrack in order to find what's changed. It's usually in the same area that you've loaded into. It still took me a while to figure out that one of the bloody subway gates opened, and only one. There's 2 subway gates, but only the one with the 2 police officers in front of it, who would probably stop you from going into a subway after a fucking earthquake is the one that's open for some reason. You could have at least opened both of them and let me go down either way, but yeah. Basically, the entire game just feels like a linear set of find where they want you to be, and then be there, and then find where they want you to go again without getting conked by a falling building or something. And it starts to get really frustrating because this happens multiple times in the first few hours. And you can speedrun the game pretty easily if you know where you're going. Like, you can seriously do an entire chapter of this game or whatever in, like, 3 minutes. Because that's what I had to do, because my save file was really far back when my computer died on me. But it's still really frustrating to deal with because the amount of wandering that you have to do to find the one thing that changed is honestly really impressive. Like, there was this one time in the very first level where I couldn't figure out what the bloody hell I was meant to do until I looked at the in-game map, which by the way is useless because it rarely updates. It doesn't tell you what you've done, it just tells you what you've discovered, which might not mean something that you've actually done. And it told me about this woman who was sitting on the 3rd floor of the department store with a gold ribbon. And that's the only clue I had that this woman was even remotely important. And the game was right, because I basically just had to walk around, talk to everyone in that department store, and then I could go back up and talk to the lady up the top, and she would tell me that she had the key, to which I needed to go and do whatever it is that I needed to do next. Shit like this happens all the time. Where it's just arbitrary bullshit that you have to go and do before something will actually happen in the world. And sometimes it's okay. Like, there's this really obvious set of puzzles where you need to go and talk to, like, people in, like, this department store early on in this video footage. And this puzzle set is okay, because there's, like, 3 different sets of things you can go do. And there are some obvious solutions going on. And yeah, it all makes a relatively decent amount of sense. But then you get bullshit like talk to literally everyone until you're able to talk to this lady on the 3rd floor who'll give you the key, they'll let you progress. And it drives me mad. It's just so obtuse for no good reason. And it's full of this bullshit. Like, one of the major things that I have against this game is doing things that no one in their right mind would do after an earthquake. But you have to do them. Like, for example, you have to go into a multi-story building during an earthquake. You have to go into a building that's fallen over via climbing on a table in, like, this is a motion I haven't told you anything about, by the way. They've given you, like, no clue that you can climb on something just by walking towards it, but you have to do it to get inside a building that's fallen over during an earthquake, and then you have to go into a subway during an earthquake. And it's just, what? Why in God's name would they make you do some of this shit? Like, I get the idea. It's a video game. They want you to go and do the exciting things. They want you to go and they want you to go and be part of, like, a big collapsing building during an earthquake. I get that. But what in my right mind would convince me to do that? Just in general. There's this what's the word I'm thinking of? It's just game design. Game design could make some way to convince you to go into that building. Like, if I'd walked out the door of another building or something, and then there was this cutscene that panned up on the building and had this lady, like, sitting at the window going, "Please help me," or something like that, right? If there was something like that, I would be convinced to go into the building. But instead, I found myself wandering around for 10 minutes and then finding there was a bloody desk there. And I'm like, can I get on top of this? I can get on top of this. Why was I not able to find this out by myself? And same thing with the subway. If, like, there was a mini cutscene, like, during the aftershock that showed the door falling open, because it's like one of those shutters that you drop down, like, in a store, right, to close the store up. You think to yourself, okay, there's no way I'm getting past that. This isn't the direction I have to go. But it opens up anyway, for some reason. It just looks weird. And I constantly find myself thinking, this isn't the way I have to go. And then it ends up being the way I need to go anyway. It's just thoroughly frustrating level design. Because you have to wander around hoping you find the right thing, do things that are entirely against sensibility, and then have to go and do things like talk to everyone in a building in order to go back down and, go back up, I should say, and talk to this one random person who has the key that I only get tipped off by a completely useless map. And I just can't help but think to myself that there would be so many other ways that, like, a proper adventure game would do this kind of set of mechanics. but this game just refuses to, and it feels really just undercooked. There are a couple of other gameplay mechanics, but throughout the 3 hours that I could stand to play this game, they didn't really come into it much. You've got food, hunger, and toilet usage as your sort of basic survival needs. You've, of course, got your health, and you've also got a stress meter, which activates if you do something like if you get caught, like, not bracing yourself against the floor. But if you just go and rest at a save point, it's okay. It's really basic stuff, and it's really easy to, find yourself, like, just find yourself a save point and rest up and get rid of that stress. It's also really easy to find a bunch of resources because, like, even at this, like, convenience store thing that I've got going on in the footage here, you do eventually get the ability to buy a bunch of really cheap supplies that'll keep you going for a while, so it doesn't seem like it'd be particularly hard. Unless you're like me, needing to constantly wander around to find where, like, the rest of the, where you need to be constantly wandering around to find where you need to go next, which is, like, great, fantastic. However, it's not really helped out by the quality of the game's writing. Now, if I was in NIS America, say I was a script editor, and I got the script for this game, and I was asked my opinion for it, I would ask them, is this a goddamn joke? Is this legitimately a joke? Because the writing in this game is just, it's irrelevant. That seems to be the worst thing about it. Like, the absolute majority of people that you talk to early on in this game seem to have basically no idea that an earthquake's happened. Like, here in the convenience store, this is actually pretty smart, because not only do you get, like, a little opportunity to pocket a bit of money for yourself, you've got a guy who'll also pocket a bit of money for himself. That stuff is okay. The rest of it is irrelevant. You've got a student who's worrying about, a teacher who's worrying about her students during an earthquake, but none of them seem to give a shit about the actual earthquake, except for this one situation where you have to push a truck out of the way. You've got a bunch of people who are worried more about their jobs than the earthquake. You got a bunch of people who are worried about basically everything else except themselves in this earthquake. And it's also not helped out by the fact that you've basically got, for some reason, 5 to 10 options for every dialogue screen that all seem to lead to the same result. It's really weird just how often that happens. Especially when there's, like, a bunch of voiced scenes that all have, like, 7 different options that almost have no effect. Now, there is a morality system in this game where you can get moral points and immoral points, which are basically just good and evil points, right? And there are multiple conversations in this game where you will have, like, 9 different options, and some of them are outright evil. Like, very early on in the game, you can have a conversation with a random woman, or with a random group of people, I should say, and it basically gives you the option to say something like, convince them all to buy bandages at a higher price. And you think to yourself, that'd give them, like, that'd give me immoral points, wouldn't it? It doesn't. Meanwhile, down in the subway later on in this footage, you get a few choices of dialogue when you're confronted by 2 would-be rapists, and you say to, you've got an option to say, hands off, she's mine. But it's at the very bottom of the screen, and you think to yourself, oh, this will just be him saying something along the lines of, get away from her, she's my girlfriend. But no, it kind of turns out to be the opposite, and you end up getting immoral points for it. And there's just this weird lack of consistency across all of the game's writing in this case, and it just feels weird, man. It's just really bizarre at the end of the day, just how many options there are, how many of them just feel irrelevant, and it kind of feels like Yakuza, how it has all of those weird options. But the thing about Yakuza is that it really puts effort into having the weird options be weird options, and it puts effort into the straight-laced options being the straight-laced options. This game just has so many options that it has no time to focus on any of them, and it all just feels irrelevant, like it's trying to waste your time. Especially early on in the game, where they're basically trying to give you like a personality and a history quiz, where they're trying to find out what the personality behind your dude is. There's so many of these questions, to the point where even they get kind of sick of it, and they give you an option to say, just stop with this shit and let me play the game already. When it gets that bad, I think they realize there's a problem. But yeah, I got to admit, the writing is just really bad because nobody seems cognizant of the situation they're in. Well, mostly nobody. There are a few situations with which make sense, but you'd think there'd be more of them. You'd think there'd be more situations where you kind of have to deal with the fact that an earthquake's happened. But when your first random set of conversations are a teacher worrying about her students and the students basically being complete assholes to her in the middle of a goddamn earthquake that has visibly knocked over buildings, when there's a conversation with a guy who basically is just whining because he missed his interview because there was a gigantic fucking earthquake, and when there's a bunch of other, irrelevant conversations like that going on, not to mention the overall quality of the writing isn't something to endear yourself to either. They've got 15 different characters they list out in the thing, and none of them feel like they were written by different people or people with different character voices. So it just remains thoroughly uninteresting and outright ridiculous just due to some of the things that the characters decide to do in the middle of an earthquake. It's like, what's wrong with them? What the hell are they doing? These aren't real people. These are absolute caricatures that are absolutely uninteresting in any way, shape, or form. I apologize if I start skipping dialogue lines at this point, but this is the point where I basically stopped caring because the game did not seem to be getting any better than this. It's also not helped out by the fact that the game's presentation is just a bit off, and it took me a while to realize what it is. So I'm just wandering around this absolutely perfect Japanese future city, not a speck of dirt or dirtiness or anything like that going on here at all. Basically no one's been wiped out by a building yet. It does happen later on in the game, I will admit that. Early on you think to yourself, oh, they're not going to go so far as showing people crushed under rubble or what have you. They do, but it doesn't happen at first. So you find yourself wandering around this otherwise absolutely perfect city if it wasn't for the cracks in the wall, a couple of buildings had been toppled over, and maybe one or two objects on fire. And that's when I realized everything is just too pure. There's no dirt anywhere outside of these really giant, obviously pre-made piles. Even the shelves are there's so many things, there's no spilled water, there's no crumbs of food that's been spilled anywhere, there's no random metallic pieces on the road. It's just too clean in that sense. It's like a PlayStation 1 game where they didn't really have the ability to render that sort of detail, but this is the PlayStation 4, man. You could have afforded to have some dirt piles here and there, outside of the really big and obvious environmental hazards and all that. Combine that with the people who don't have a speck of dust, sweat, or anything like that on them anywhere, and the fact that it's just too clean. It's just too weird in the grand scheme of things. This supermarket here looks fine, but then you get out on the street and the only things out of place are a couple of cracks in the floor and a couple of floor tiles, and that's it. And it just doesn't look right. But there are some other really strange things about this game that are just, what's the word I'm looking for? That are just really weird decisions. Like the radio, for example. So the radio is a little item that you get early on that you can go and turn on. They'll have disaster broadcasts, right? And it'll be displayed by a little bit of scrolling text in the top right corner of the screen. And when you turn it on, you'll get a little translation of it. That's what the scrolling text is in the top right corner of the screen. But it starts out way too slow and gets so fast that thanks to the motion blur that the game applies, you can't fucking read it. And eventually it gets to a point where it'll stop because the broadcast stopped, and half the screen will still be unreadable, and it'll click away before you can read the rest of the text. So it literally leaves you with 95% of a translation. And it's so fucking bizarre. Did no one check that? Did absolutely no one check that? It's so weird. Also, if my timing's right, here I am getting knocked out by a building. Also, yes, you do have the ability to crawl. The game's controls are a bit stiff, and I had a bit of trouble getting up in time. Also, random chair just appeared in the front of the camera, but why not? But yeah, the radio is just weird, like how they didn't actually check it to make sure it could actually be read at a reasonable pace. I could understand some kind of in-between speed where it's going by, like, relatively quickly in order to make sure that, you know, you can get through the audio at the same time as the text, but it's just so weird to have it accelerate to the point where you can't fucking read it. A couple of other weird things involve the AI behavior, where the AI tends to just, like, stand in place doing really weird poses, walk right through you, stop and then just walk right through you like you weren't even there, but you were there. And the absolute weirdest one that I found was, there's a certain point where you get to an overhanging highway, and I did take a bit of time to examine this during this footage, because I'm thinking to myself, as soon as I saw, like, a set of AI just U-turn and walk back off in the opposite direction, I bet to myself internally that they're going to get to the other end of this street, and they're going to turn around and they're going to walk right back. And I was right. I was absolutely right. It's just so bizarre, just sitting there watching like 50 individual AI after the middle of an earthquake walk around in a gigantic oval underneath an overpass after a fucking earthquake. Admittedly, that bunch of AI got what they deserved. But I just gotta say, it's so freaking weird. And they have so many other like little things that make you think to yourself, why did they do it like this? Like, my personal favorite that I'll end the video off on is a situation where you wander into an office and there's a dead guy on the floor. He's very obviously dead. He's got a knife embedded right in his back up to the fucking handle. He's got a big, like, pool of blood spreading out from him, which, by the way, is the first example of blood you see in the game, which also isn't really right. And there's a woman who's very clearly looting the safe, just in the corner of the room. And you get the option to talk to her and be like, and she's kind of lost her mind, and she's got all of these jewels in her hand. And she's like, I'm not gonna let you take my jewels. And that's fine, okay? But then you have to walk over to the safe and pull the diamond safe key out while she's still rummaging through it, which creates this really odd looking image where a guy in, like, convenience store clothes is reaching over the back of a fucking murderer to pull out something from a safe behind her without having to worry, like, about the fact that this woman probably won't turn around and stab him as well. But the absolute kicker for what makes this entire scene so bizarre is what the internal monologue of the main character says about the guy on the ground. He doesn't say, oh, this guy's clearly dead, oh, I should probably be careful about this woman. No, the line is, and I'm not quoting this directly, but I'm giving you the general gist of it, oh, that guy looks out of breath. It's fucking weird in its presentation of an earthquake. The writing is terrible. The gameplay is so on rails to the point where it becomes honestly frustrating, and it expects you to do things that make absolutely no sense unless you're thinking about it in being the context of a video game about an earthquake where they expect you to do really dumb things. And it's not even remotely enjoyable. It's the biggest pile of tripe I've had the displeasure of playing in the past 12 months, and I don't know what convinced them that this would be okay to release. It's so weird going and seeing like the positive reviews of this game on Steam, because it makes me think that none of them actually played it. It's just, it's so odd. It's really odd. And I don't know what convinced them to design a game this way. This is a really cool idea, which is why like the Raw Danger and the other game that came out on PS2 that also got localized under a completely different name for some reason. there's a reason why those games remain cult classics on the PS2, because it's such a neat idea. And back during the PS2 games, where Japanese people were basically trying anything and everything because it was relatively cheap to program and release for the PlayStation 2, this game would have worked back then. But we've had like 10 years to think about it, and we're still full of like ridiculous bullshit that just doesn't work in the grand scheme of things. And I can't help but think to myself what they were thinking. I guess the only upsides that I have to say about it is that the couple of times where they really do make you duck and cover, like say in the convenience store, or when there's like a building falling over in front of you and they actually put some effort into making it look cool when it falls over, that's kind of neat. And there's like, you know, sometimes there's one or two like neat situations that they've got going for them, but the one situation that really killed me and what really made me stop playing this game, and by coincidence happens to be the very end of this footage, is when they've got like the couple of rapists they talked about earlier. They tie you up and it's like, oh cool, maybe there'll be like a cool escape sequence, or maybe there'll be something like that I can do. Nope, it's this unbelievably slow-paced, sluggish, and I do mean slug, because that's what the movement animations resemble. But yeah, there's this unbelievably slow stealth section that you have to do that is just utterly infuriating and just makes me think that they wanted to pad it out for time more than anything else. And that's just kind of the best example of this game. Extremely slow-paced, the promise was something cool, but it's just kind of let down by literally everything that's going on around you. I wouldn't recommend it in the slightest. This has been Blue Maxima. I will see you all next time.
ここまで来れば大丈夫ですよね。
そんな彼女を見て僕はこんなところで寝るなんて非常識なやつだな。
私、笠原弥生って言います。あなたの名前教えてもらっていいですか？素敵な名前ですね。 私もう少しここで休んでいきます。すごく大きな地震みたいだけど気をつけてくださいね。
君も
ありがとうございます。
初めてだね。こんなことになってるなんて。
くそ、繋がらない。ここまで来てたどり着けないとは。
霧島様、いかがですか？
ダメだ。相馬にも中西にも連絡が取れない。サーバーはどうなってるんだ？
皆さん、あなたの留守の間もちゃんと会社を守ってくれていますよ。
本当にそうならいいんだがな。あの二人が一番信用ならんのだ。
なんてことを。
とにかく会社はすぐそこだ。何としてもたどり着くさ。ぼーっとするな。ああ、ぶつかられて転ぶやつは所詮その程度ってことさ。とにかく俺の邪魔をするやつは皆弾き飛ばすまでだ。
大丈夫ですか？あの方はここから南に行ったところにあるレストラという IT 企業を経営されている方です。根は悪い人ではないのですが、事業の方で緊張が続くようで、時として乱暴な態度をとってしまわれるのです。
そう。
あなたの大きなここもあなたも気をつけて。
おかしいわね。どこで落としたのかしら。
できるだけ取っておかないと。
すごいわね。
俺は取っとかないとな。
できなかった
みんなに見せなきゃ。
おりゃただもうダメか。どうすれば向こう側に行けるんだろう。
どうしてこんなことに。
まあ地震が起きたんだから仕方ないんじゃないですか。
そうですよ。こうなっちゃったらどうしようもないですよ。
お二人ともシェフの気持ちを察してあげられないですか？
何カッコつけてんのよ。
分かってるの。分かってるんだけど。
そりゃ苦労してやっとの思いで手に入れた店がこんな風になったんだから落ち込むのは分かりますが、これ以上ここにいても。
そろそろ帰ってもいいですか？ここにいても危なそうだし。
ん？なんだい、見ての通り営業してないよ。
トイレをか。
廊下が壊れシェフ。
営業再開のめどがついたら連絡するから、その時はお願いね。
営業再開ね。
この地震の影響で川瀬県内全域で停電が発生しています。また地域によっては水道が止まっています。
何？あなた、まさか私の宝石を取りに来たの？
とんでもない。
これは私。
よく見ると彼女は怪我をしているようだ。怪我は大。
怪我？心配してるふりをしても私の宝石はあげないわよ。
素敵な歌ね。
うん。
みんな地震が起きて大変な思いをしてる時に道端で歌ってるなんて不謹慎じゃないか。
不謹慎かもしれないが絡むことはないだろう。
なんだと？
邪魔なら場所を変えるわ。
なんだなんだ、可愛げがないな。
可愛げ？歌うのに可愛げが必要なの？
別にそういうわけじゃ。
演奏を中断して申し訳ありません。今日はここまでにさせてもらいます。 ありがとう。
現在死者205人、負傷者752人の方が確認されています。
サーバーは大丈夫なんだろう。ならどうしてうちの株価が下がってるんだ。
サーバーは別の場所に分散して設置してあるので大丈夫です。ただ
なんだ。
ライバル企業のケルベロスがうちが震災で取引できないとデマを流しているようです。
なんだって？それで相馬と中西は？
相馬部長は広報室におられます。中西専務とは連絡が取れません。
中西のやつ、まさかこの機にライバル会社に。
社長、なんてことを。
とにかく中西を探せ。私は相馬のところへ行く。なんだ、お前は確かカーディーラーでぶつかられて気絶してたやつだな。目障りなやつだ。あまりうろちょろするなよ。
どちら様でしょうか。社長のお知り合いのようですが。
成り行きでここにいるだけです。
そうですか。ご覧の通り本日は何かと取り込んでおります。申し訳ありませんが、今日のところはお引き取りください。
大変だ。
進めそうにないな。
怖かった。
大変だ。
お客様の安全を考慮した結果、中止と判断したとのことです。大会日はこの後条件川崎県で発生した地震に関する情報です。警察発表の被害状況をお伝えします。現在確認されているのは
大
ーい。
助けてください。助けてください。助けて、動けないんです。
若い女性が下敷きになっている。それを見て僕は。綺麗な人だ。
眺めてないで助けてよ。動かないわ。
乗っている。
お願いします。待ってよ。置いていかないでよ。 ありがとう。ありがとう。気がついたら真っ暗で、叫んでも誰も来てくれなかったの。
足。
ほんと
こんなところに女がいるぞ。おほほ、こりゃいいや。ほう、確かに結構いいんじゃないの。
自信のどさくさに紛れて入り込み、好き勝手して暴れてたが、ここで女を捕まえられるとはラッキーだぜ。
彼女をどうこうするのは僕が先だぞ。
何よそれ。
とにかく二人とも縛り上げようぜ。
分かってるよ。
あなたたち話しなさいよ。
暴れるなよ。すぐに良くなるからよ。
しっかり縛り上げろ。
痛いじゃない。話してよ。
手間をかけさせやがって。
でも少しくらい抵抗してもらえないとこっちも盛り上がらないんじゃない？さっさと縄を解け。そう言われて「はいそうですか」って解くわけがないだろうが。
どうせ俺たちは地震が起きなくても人生終わっても同然だったんだ。今さら何かして捕まろうが殺されようがどうでもいいことさ。
そうだそうだ。どうせ何をやっても報われないんだ。やりたいことをやるだけだ。
こいつら狂ってるわ。
そうさ、狂ってるさ。
おい、お楽しみは後だ。俺はまだ飲み足りねえぞ。
そうだな。後でたっぷり可愛がってやるぞ。